Today's businesses are on a vigilant watch for threats in an ongoing cyber war. It's time to get real-world solutions to protect and secure your valuable business information anytime, anywhere. Welcome to Cybersecurity America with Josh Nicholson. You're about to gain special access into a world of restricted information and a backstage pass to the inner sanctum of cybersecurity operations. Here's your host, Joshua Nicholson.
Welcome back to a new episode. Today is going to be an interesting episode. Today I have Kamel Tamimi. He's a senior solutions consultant with Zscaler. He's a friend of mine. I've known him for many years. And today we have him on to discuss about cybersecurity in the Middle East, a lot of the things that are going on in that region of the world. He also has a lot of good information on things that are developing in the industry. So he's an accomplished and a visionary cybersecurity professional. Kamel has over 2 decades of experience in the field. He's renowned for leveraging holistic solutions architecture and has consistently built client-centric relationships that fortify critical business functions, stimulate growth, and maximize that ROI. Throughout his career, he's devised strategies to successfully deliver multi-vendor solutions, sales, and implementation projects across diverse industries. He's committed to transforming complex challenges into elegant solutions that align with those business objectives. As a collaborative leader, he's passionate about influencing industry standards and fostering progressive security practices. Now, Kamel's expertise and leadership have made him a sought-after speaker and thought leader in the cybersecurity community. He's dedicated to sharing his knowledge and insights to helping organizations navigate the complexities of cybersecurity and achieve those strategic goals. Well, welcome to the show, Kamel. It is so great to have you, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. It's great to be back on the show and great to have my video up this time. Last time I was moving houses. I was the appropriate situation, but today I'm very happy to have this face-to-face conversation with you, and I'm happy to be back on this show.
Awesome. That is great to have you, Kamel. Can you introduce yourself? I know I probably missed some stuff on the bio, and just kind of share your journey in the cybersecurity industry. Specifically on today's show, we're kind of talking about AI, machine learning, and that zero trust. So you want to kind of go from there, kind of explain your background in that area?
Absolutely. So I started in IT. I was software engineer, ventured into networking and IT management with a service provider. Then I wanted to specialize in cybersecurity. So I started penetration testing, secure code review, leveraging my knowledge. And then I focused more on risk and compliance, which led me to work as a risk manager in cybersecurity for a financial institute. And from there, I start working as a consultant in the sales team for vendor. And my vision haven't changed. So I started with multiple vendors, and where I am today with Zscaler. And my vision remained the same, is how to tailor the solution to fit into the customer needs, but also from consultative point of view, because there is no one size fits all. Different challenges, different regulation, different requirement. Today is on my 3rd year with Zscaler in Dubai, covering Middle East and Africa as part of our emerging MEA team. I'm happy to be working with a lot of extraordinary customers who have adopted cloud solution, adopting zero trust framework, but also want to leverage the cutting edge technologies such as AI and machine learning. I believe we had conversation about AI and machine learning at either RSA or Black Hat 7 years ago. And the conversation back then, was it mature enough to do what is promised to do? And I think today we are still seeing some maturity in the right direction.
That's great. From the zero trust, you hear a lot about that in the industry right now. What exactly is zero trust? How does that relate to everything else that you got going on at Zscaler? I know Zscaler is like leader in that area, but if I had to explain zero trust to someone, how would I explain it to them?
So zero trust is basically a concept and a framework for cybersecurity. In a concept, it's a never trust, always verify. That's mean I know you, I know your face, but I wouldn't trust you. I have to verify. Like even if you're coming to my house, I verify before I let you in the door. I have to verify if you requested a glass of water. So always verifying That is the core concept of zero trust. Every request has to be verified. There are levels of, or what we call the 5 pillars of verification, which is the identity, the network, the application, the device, and as a framework, CISA had put a maturity, zero trust maturity framework built on these 5 pillars. So any organization is wanting to go through the journey of adopting zero trust has to look at across these 5 pillars and measure their maturity. It's not a single department project. It's not a one-time project. It's not a single product. It's a combination of product technologies and practices in order to achieve a certain level of maturity in zero trust. But you have to understand it's a journey towards this maturity. So it's a continuous improvement. Technologies change. We see technology that used to be very expensive has become used in every day, like multi-factor authentication. I remember when the second factor authentication used to be a hardware token and you have to carry it with you all the time. Yeah. And that was dedicated to a certain department. Now you have it in your smartphone. You set it up to access your personal social media account, even as a second factor authentication. So as this technology has become more available, more affordable, incorporating it in the zero trust to achieve that level of maturity become easier. And of course, in the future, will be more technologies that will become affordable and attainable for organization to incorporate them. But the framework remains the same. The more data I can use to verify every request, I need to incorporate that data, and that will give me that level of maturity.
Got it. Yeah, and I'm curious. I hear artificial intelligence and zero trust together. I mean, do the two technologies come together, or what are your thoughts on those two?
It's not about coming together. It's about, as I said, utilizing the tools that are available. So when zero trust needs a lot of data, what we call pointers, to assess every request, in the traditional way, you have what we call a static policy. The static policy is basically you make 5 conditions, that's your good go. Zero trust, and with all this data that I can get as pointers from the device, from the user, from the network the user is connected through, all that, I can assess these policies in a dynamic way. So the AI here comes because there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information. I want the AI to be able to process all this information in a quick time and give me a risk value. And based on that risk value, I can make a decision. And this decision can be divert the traffic to deception, for example, or send it through more rigorous security controls, depending on the risk value of the user. And also the AI can help me to look into the history of that requester. So if that requester is just sent a request from Dubai, and 5 minutes later he sent a request from the US, there's something wrong. If I don't have this historical look, and that's the AI and machine learning is learning the patterns of the users and all that, I cannot make this kind of dynamic and aware, risk-aware decision. So this is where AI comes in. You have more data to process, and AI is great in processing more data, learning to make these decisions, and also guide these policies and what would be the outcome beyond the traditional just allow and block, because now we have more options to control the request and the additional security control that we can enforce in every request.
It's interesting. Yeah, especially since, like you were saying, zero trust is pretty much that, or before zero trust was that permit or deny. You either permitted something, you were denied something. What you're saying is that those criteria that you can use, that granularity is increased significantly, and you're able to do a lot more, not just with are you permitted, are you not, but also use historical or machine learning that shows patterns of usage. So at 2 a.m, that's unusual for this person to be logging on at that time. That can be taken into consideration when determining whether to permit or not in a zero trust model. Is that correct?
That's correct, absolutely. And if we look at the 5 pillars, each of these 5 pillars, as I said, can give us more information. So let's say you have to go at 2 a.m. because there's an emergency. What is the alternative? Your identity is correct, everything is correct, and you're coming from a network perspective, from your IP home network that always comes in. What additional factors I can look at? Is the device you're coming from, is your usual device? Does it have all the security turned on? There is no compromise in the device, so I can add another layer of verification for that request. This is an usual request. What additional verification I can add? What data are you trying to access? Are you trying to access data that you're not allowed to access in the usual, or trying to download or upload massive amount of data out of the usual? So now I have another pointer that can tell me, oh, increase the risk, or this is a moderate risk, but other factors give me the indicator that, yeah, this is acceptable request.
Got it. Okay. And tell me, how difficult is it to implement zero trust? Is that a rip and replace, re-architect everything? I mean, how difficult is it?
It's more of re-architect. There is no rip and replace unless when we, as I said, we look at each of these pillars individually and all together at the same time. So let's start from the identity, for example. If you don't have an identity provider capable of providing you with the control that you need in terms of maturity, still using an on-prem LDAP server, then yeah, that's something you need to rip and replace. But if you have moved to single sign-on, integrated with all your application, and have the capabilities for two-factor authentication, then this is great. This is, step one in zero trust from identity perspective. If you have your network segmented in a proper way, that you can add more control, knowing exactly where is your application, cloud location, etc., then you have this level of maturity in the network. All your application use single sign-on. There is no application that does not have that integration. All your application can feed into the visibility of your central logging location. Then you have reached that level of maturity in the application. And then all these working together, your identity integrated with your application and all that. So zero trust, as I said, is a framework, but you have to look at all of these pillars to make sure that you have at least the minimum requirement. Maybe you need to replace, maybe you need to acquire a new solution, but in most of the cases, the replacement will be happening on a level of the broker of the policy. You still use the identity, you still use your data classification as it is, you still use your network as it is with some minor improvement, but what would be the most important thing is the broker or the policy engine that will receive this request, look at all that information as a central location, and then make that decision to allow, deny, send the traffic somewhere else, add more control, or request more information.
Well, that makes sense. So what you're saying is this framework does not come just free. You can just plop it on top of legacy protocols and legacy systems. You're going to have to upgrade some areas. You can't use some legacy protocols. It's like POP3, IMAP4. You can't put MFA on in Azure. And so what you're saying is that you do need to make some investment in infrastructure to take advantage of this. You just can't plop it on top of old stuff.
Yeah, that's basically the gist of it. Because, for example, I would say, like if you look at firewall, for example, in the traditional way, you used to open port 80 and 443 outbound TCP for all users. They need to access the internet. That's it. But now you have tunneling. I can use port 80 and 443 to send non-HTTP traffic. So if I don't have the mechanism to verify every transaction that goes through 80 and 443 that it's RFC compliant with HTTP traffic, then could be data exfiltration. So that is, if I don't have these capabilities, then I need to obtain these capabilities. Many applications use dynamic ports. If I don't have my security stack that can determine the type of the traffic, regardless of the port being agnostic, then I need to acquire in order to be able to verify every transaction. Basic concept, verify everything. If you cannot verify it, then you're not in the zero trust.
Got it. So it's not just, you hear buzzwords around, people say, well, my product is zero trust. They throw it around the same way they do machine learning and cloud. I think salesmen do us a dishonor in many ways because they try to quantify a term to a customer to make a sale, but then we fight that description for like years of what that means. machines.
Absolutely. And this is my advice to the customers. You have these publication from these trusted institute like CISA, like SANS, and many others. You can have these publication, look at it, how they describe zero trust, how they define the framework, and then have your own interpretation of it. And then when you are evaluating any product, it might be not even labeled zero trust product, but does it comply with my short and medium terms for zero trust? Because as I said, there is no one size fits all, depending on your organization, the criticality of the systems and what you are trying to achieve. And then that's your evaluation of the zero trust. But this water is keto, it's diet, it's sugar free, it's non-GMO, but it's still water. Like all these labels, it means nothing. The same thing for any product. I can label my product as anything, but just look at these in terms of the interpretation of these framework documents. The good thing, these are free. You don't have to pay any money. If you are a lucky enterprise that have a consulting firm, many large organizations have consulting firms, involve your consulting firm. If you have trusted vendors, which I don't call them vendor, but I call them technology partners that you have already invested a lot of money with in any of these 5-pillar domain, involve them, see if these people can work together. Would they look at their roadmaps? Would they be able to serve your goals in the future? And then assess which system needs to be retired, which system needs to be upgraded, which system can serve me for my short term and medium term. I don't need to change and put more investment.
Got it. So this is really for more of a progressive information security program rather than one that's tradition that just keeps costs down, old machines, just get monitoring. This is an investment infrastructure moving forward, you would say.
But this investment can be justified. This is very important because if we're talking about keeping costs down, if you are hit with a ransomware, today was Japanese airline that's hit with a ransomware and delayed. This is millions of dollars. So when you're doing your ROI calculation of any project, especially in cybersecurity, what is the cost of downtime? Factory and this machine that's now industry 4 IEC whatever IB connected, and this can be hit with a ransomware, and this machine can be stopped for 2-3 days because of that. How much money this machine would cost me? Would this new measure justify the cost? And that's why it's very important when we talk to the vendor as a customer is to work to help the ROI, what system we can replace, what licenses we can replace, what costs we can keep down. And that's not only just licenses and hardware, we're talking about operational cost. If this system is smarter than having 10 analysts with their eye glued to the screens for 24/7, and they can reduce it to 2 analysts working a shift, then that's also a cost I'm reducing. If this is reducing the probability of my being under attack, then this is also a cost calculation. That's where you can look at your ROI and say, I have saved this amount of money because of this investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, granted, the United States cyber problems and Dubai's Middle Eastern cyber problems overlap. They usually is somewhat similar. How is it different in the Middle East now? You got conflict in Israel, you have conflict out of Yemen. How is that impacting, and what's important to Middle Eastern customers versus maybe US or UK or some area?
I think the concerns are similar. So the means of attack, state-sponsored attack, similar. You have 2 factors here. Is either financial factor where people trying to steal money, it's ransomware, or it's political factor, people trying to make a statement. I remember at the beginning of the conflict, there was website just putting, we did this 10 attacks, major corporates in Saudi or UAE. This is just either defacing the main page or just denial of service, like not hacking. But this is, how hacktivism, everyone wants to try to score to show that they're, doing a better job. So the concerns are similar. the means of attack are similar. We're talking about, infrastructure for rents in terms of DDoS. So you have DDoS as a service, you have hacking as a service. Toolkit are sold on the dark web for $50, $150, getting customized. So the means of attack, the signatures and the behavior is similar. Yeah, I would say the cause of it, what's behind it is may be different, but still almost the same, and almost most of it similar actors are involved. And this is why in this region, cybersecurity is very important. We're talking about very critical infrastructure. So oil and gas, very critical infrastructure. This is many of these in the region, 50%, if not more, of the country GDP coming from these resources. Automation is very high. It's very important. You have also growing up industries with the modernization of these countries. So with it's heavy industries, light industries, all that is very important. Telecommunication is key. 5G networks is normal across the region. Also, the use of e-commerce, ride shares, and all that is very common. So all this is very important because the most important thing I believe in the governments of this region is keeping the citizen comfortable. We're not involved in this conflict in directly, but we don't want this to be impacting our citizen. We want the citizen to always feel safe, always feel comfortable that the country is stable and all that. So this is why they're always a concern about cybersecurity. I want the new technology, but on my own term, in order to ensure the privacy of my employee, of my citizens, to ensure the privacy of my critical infrastructure. The concerns are similar, but the way they approach it quite different.
Last time I was in Dubai, you and we met a couple customers. We're in Saudi Arabia too, as well. Their aspect of what's important to them and what's happening in the Middle East. At that time, they really didn't have a lot of cloud providers. AWS wasn't in region.
Yeah.
Azure wasn't in region. Is that changed? Do we have
Absolutely.
AWS in the kingdom?
As I told you, like in our last conversation, it's like they went to all the hyperscaler. We welcome you. We're going to give you all the facilities that you need, but you have to have your own region within the country. So in the region right now, all the major hyperscalers, they have their own region in the country. Oracle, Google, Alibaba, AWS, even in multiple countries. So you have AWS is now in UAE, in Bahrain, that I believe in Saudi officially going to be launched within months. You have Azure in Qatar, UAE, Saudi, OCI, Oracle, Google in multiple countries. Even some of these hyperscalers are willing to build a private region. If you are a big customer, you have a lot of subsidiaries. I'm willing to build you your own region, your own private region for consumption that is not exposed to the public region within the country to give you an additional layer of privacy and security. The smart thing, because number one, you meet regulation, you ensure your data as your citizen data and your corporate's data as a country is within the country, is not going to be anywhere. But also this is forcing the private sector to create more jobs. Of course, that will boost the economy. And of course, all the hyperscalers, as I mentioned, are coming to the region. They're opening offices, opening data center, multiple region. And the government is, you come to my region, you open the region, I'm going to give you business. I'm going to give you a certificate allowing the government, the semi-government, to work with you and utilize you. Because at the end of the day, it's not about cloud computing is not shifting the hardware and just put it in the cloud. Every cloud provider have their own ensemble of services that people want to use because these services are superior, can cut cost when it comes to launching a new application and developing something new, from purposely built services like emailing, SMS, databases, etc., AI tools. So they want to be able to consume it and utilize it and benefit from it, but on their own term, and it's working. So this is where we see more and more of the hyperscaler opening regions within this region and providing their services locally.
No, that's good because I remember the trouble you and I used to run into in the Middle East. Just people wanted everything in region, and there was no equivalent. We didn't have our applications ran in AWS. There was no AWS.
Yeah,
There was that new Saudi law that came out. We had to get lawyers out of Dubai to interpret it, and what did it mean. And you could see around the world, sometimes these governments get in the way of technology and cybersecurity and cause us to build additional controls just because of political or national reasons. It has nothing to do with redundancy. It has nothing to do with data. It just happens to do with politics and countries and so forth.
yeah. So this is where this region is different. I would say I would call them the Eastern and Western model. The Eastern model is no, not allowed. Which is like you see it sometimes in some Asian country where like till today and you're not allowed to use certain services or cloud services. And even in some countries in the Middle East are the same. And the Western where the regulator trying to follow up with the changes. So everything is allowed, but then the new risk comes out and we try. Here they have more of a in the middle kind of approach. Is like there's going to be a regulation. It's not going to be denied. It's going to be reasonable conditions, and we have our own objective behind it. And it's happened. Everyone wants to work with this region. This region is the gateway to most of the Middle East and other countries. So it works. It might be slowing the adoption a little bit. We understand the concerns of each country. That's my data is not going somewhere else. Someone else can have access to it. But also the regulation here is very dynamic. So the NCA in Saudi update what they call the ECC, the critical control, every year now adding more like zero trust adoption to it. UAE was one of the first countries to have regulation around cryptocurrencies. What cryptocurrencies allowed to be traded within the country, what platform get the licenses. So they have regulated this. While most of the countries in the Middle East are, no, you cannot use cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is blocked. So having this middle ground and kind of progressive regulation help boosting the economy, help attracting talent, and attract business, of course, to the region.
Well, tell me this. I was just thinking about it when we were talking about earlier, but can you share some real world examples just of how AI powered systems have successfully detected threats that would have just otherwise gone unnoticed in legacy security systems?
Absolutely. One of the first things that you can look at, for example, is trying to DDoS your security. So one of the things that as an attacker I could do is I create a payload and then change the signature, but adding just random character. So the hash file, the hash code of each file is different. And then I send it through, a phishing attack to you. So every employee is receiving a different file. If I'm using sandboxing, the sandbox will be overwhelmed. There's, 30,000 files. I need to run them it will take 6 minutes to give. So within this window, somebody would be opening a file and that still has not been processed or getting. With AI, I don't need to look at the hash or execute the file. I can just look beyond, say, I have seen this file before. It's similar in terms of the structure, the component of it to something else. And in 70% certainty that this file is malicious. So I don't have to go waste processing power of the sandbox. This file is malicious. Or I've seen this kind of technique in a different attack and I have 60%. So you can, because AI give you a certain level of certainty. So you can set your certainty level and say, it's 60% or above, it's okay, I will accept your verdict, Mr. AI, consider it malicious. And that's how we can accelerate defending, because I don't now need to waste a lot of processing power. I look at the file, or look at the pattern of the traffic, or look at certain things. And because we have the machine learning, so I've seen this kind of behavior before, I don't have to go and waste all this time and processing power to verify. I can give a verdict, protect the user, and then add this as additional to my, the data lake that I learned from. This is the new patterns that I have discovered. So AI can accelerate this. Remember, we talked about, and every SOC manager talked about alert fatigue.
Yeah.
This is problem with a lot of alert fatigues. Is I receive 1,500 alerts from my SIM, and my team is like overwhelmed. And some of these attack, but when you have the AI, that's the power. Is I can look at these data, and I can find correlation and between these data, and I can say, okay, what's really happening? Help guiding the decision. It's not going to replace your SOC analyst, it's not going to replace your people, but it can help verify, look at huge amount of data, and give certain verdict. I'm 70% sure that these alerts are false positive. That could be a great thing to save time of the SOC analyst. Or these are the 10% of high priority alerts. So there are multiple ways AI can help by analyzing certain information, looking at, let's say, a debug log for a certain problem, and say, I've seen this and that, and now my number one diagnosis is the problem here. Second, here. So this is how AI can help by just reducing the amount of time that a human would need to look at large amount of data or analyze certain patterns.
No, makes a lot of sense. One question I'm curious about is the ransomware actors in the Middle East different than the ones that are attacking the US? I mean, obviously, if you steal data in the Middle East, a lot of it can be written in Arabic. What good is that to a ransomware operator
Well,
if they don't speak Arabic?
Um, well, data is data. Doesn't matter what language it's written in. So English is still the business language. So everything will be written in English. So if I'm looking, depending what kind of data I'm looking for. So if it's a bank transaction, all banks use English. So that's all accounts, credit card information, etc. That's a universal language for business. If it's a telecom data, I just want to get, some verified numbers to sell them to spammers and or scammers, or email address, or any of these information is still universal. But the most important thing that we're talking about in this region, if I'm looking for data exfiltration, depending on what you are targeting, there is this geo data for satellite and sensory for drilling gas and oil. These cost millions of dollars to be done, to do this geographical survey. If I can steal it, there definitely 100 oil and gas company around the world would be happy to pay for it, or some actor want to pay for it. If I knew today that Saudi had verified that they found a massive reserve of oil and gas in somewhere nobody knew about before, I can make economical prediction. I can shorten the oil. I can do whatever. So this is the kind of data, and this is all universal. So regardless of the language, there are certain universal data that they're looking after. The other thing, as I said, the ransomware is not about just data exfiltration. Data exfiltration is one aspect of it. But when we talk about targeting certain systems that are so expensive, that's if it's shut down, it's talk about, for example, a steel factory or an aluminum factory. If a machine shut down, and I remember a few years back, there was a casualty where somebody died because they played with the sensor of the heat of the furnace. If I shut down the furnace and the ransomware shut down the furnace, and the steel hardened within the furnace, this will take years to be removed. the whole factory will be useless. This is $1 billion investment that I can destroy with the ransomware. And this is why OT security has become a top priority for nation, because it literally can bring a nation to its knees if their main steel factory or aluminum factory or cement factory been turned off, and all the machine have this, whether the steel or metals or cement hardened within the machine, that means the whole factory is scrapped. I need to rebuild this $1 billion and years of investment gone. So this is why it's important. So data exfiltration is one part of it, but disrupting the critical infrastructure is more damaging, especially if it's a state actor.
Oh, it makes sense. Yeah, I remember the time Aramco got hit, if you remember that wiper from Iran, and they lost thousands and thousands of hard drives. And you saw Seagate stock price went up because Aramco had to buy so many hard drives. Right?
That was 2012, 30,000 machines got wiped. And it was a very sophisticated attack for its time. And this is what I would say, this was the wake-up call to cybersecurity in the region, because this became the lesson learned that regardless how big you are, how big is your cybersecurity budget, best practices is more important. So that was a wake-up call across the region. And also one of the things that is, Aramco, for example, back then they had the OT completely segregated from the IT as a network, and that became like best practice, keep them segregated. But with OT now going into more layers of and more industry, so most, for example, healthcare, they only care about HIPAA or ISO 27001. While they are operating an OT machine that costs millions, every C-scan, every X-ray machine now is IT connected. These are cost millions of dollars. If this one machine got crippled by ransomware, that facility is losing money.
Yeah.
So
I remember that I got an MRI and I saw the MRI machine was hooked up to the network, and that's how they were getting the images. So it was like this MRI machine was one big IoT device.
Exactly. So imagine MRI machine that costs millions of dollars. Some of them even not only hooked to the network, some of them is hooked to cloud services because they use AI to analyze the image to give the doctor some indicator instead of the doctor just looking into grain by grain to see if there is any irregularity in MRI or C-scan images. They now use AI to analyze it and indicate certain things and give. So this machine is literally hooked to the cloud. And we're still talking about HIPAA, which is like privacy of the patient information, or ISO, which is governance and compliance. And more critical controls are missing from the healthcare, and this is more important. And this is also in terms of ROI. If you have a few $1 million machine crippled by ransomware, you are hemorrhaging money as a facility.
Yeah, and it's interesting how in healthcare, how for the longest time you couldn't upgrade systems. Security was not a concern at hospitals for the longest time. Patients' availability was, if you wanted to patch something, you couldn't do it till in the middle of the night. It was just really strict because patients' lives were kind of on the line. But what you find out is when they steal data, that the medical records, at least in the US, the medical records are more valuable than the Social Security numbers. Because if you go to get a mortgage or a loan, there's multiple layers of, you need to send in your W-2, you need to give me your ID. I mean, there's a lot of different processes on that versus if you had someone's medical record, you can initiate Medicaid fraud in order, all kind of drugs and medicine and so forth, and have fraud. And so the attackers have learned that the medical records are actually more important than the Social Security. And I'm just curious, y'all have HIPAA laws in the Middle East, or I thought that was just the U.S.?
It's just the U.S., but most of the medical organizations have the HIPAA as a standard now. But I said, like, HIPAA standard is reactionary to what happened in the U.S. Most people will follow the U.S. as best practices, but The problem is I don't want somebody to wait until some major medical OT happens, and until we have something like HIPAA, but for OT in the healthcare system or any other industry. It just best practices to look into other industries and say OT is an OT. It doesn't matter if it's a driller in the middle of the desert or on a barge in the middle of the sea, or it's a medical machine. It's OT. It's still, I have the IEC regulation for cybersecurity as best practice. I can start implementing that and looking into use cases from different manufacturing, like a medical manufacturer. It's as critical as any other manufacturer. So if any disturbance to the dosage of the chemical that goes into any medication, that's a national disaster. Ibuprofen that is toxic, that's a national disaster. So it's all important because, as I said, cybersecurity had become important because automation is everywhere, and it's going to go even further. We're talking about smart cities now. We're talking about driverless public transportation. So OT, IoT security is crucial, and we don't need to rely on outdated regulation. I'm ISO compliant. ISO compliance doesn't mean you're secure. HIPAA compliant doesn't mean you're secure. It means you are meeting the minimum that you can do for your security. But you have to look further. And also, again, it's all about ROI. What is the return on investment? What will happen if this production line, this machine shut down for a day? How much money I'm going to lose? That justifying investment in cybersecurity. And this is where you get the funding from.
So does it make sense to have the business guys really define that? Because really hard for a cybersecurity guy to define how much money that system will cost if it goes down. So is it BCP
Exactly.
plan with the business owners and go over, let's just walk through that system going offline. Well, what happens if that one and this one went offline? And just kind of walk through that scenario from a business impact perspective, and then reverse it where your job as a cybersecurity person would be to protect that business understanding and that risk that is on those systems. Is that how do
Absolutely.
you view it?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, as I said, you have the system, you can do your cybersecurity risk. You define your cybersecurity risk, and most organizations, you have cybersecurity risk and you have the corporate risk. So that will go to the corporate risk and say, this is the risk we have defined. This is what would be a compensated control, or how we can mitigate the risk. And then that's where the business risk will look at that and say, okay, if the probability is 70%, if this machine is hit by ransomware, there's a probability 70%. How much money I can lose? That's where you bring every step of the way. It has to be business and IT. It cannot be one department doing the same thing. As we talked at the beginning, zero trust. You cannot do zero trust. You go to a certain department, say, hey, implement me a zero trust, because, okay, we don't have a mature identity management. I'm the network guy. How can I do that without mature identity? You have to bring the identity. Look at the identity, for example, it requires business involvement. It requires human resource and human capital involvement to define each business or job title with what access they need, what is the process for onboarding user, which are the applications that every employee need to have access to on day one, which are application they will access after some provisional period and all that. And this goes to the identity that will automated and implemented. And then the cybersecurity guy will ensure that is enforced. So there is nothing called a single department can implement a cybersecurity program. Cybersecurity program, as an operation, yes, cybersecurity team, but as a strategy, it's everyone's responsibility.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so we just look at the future, what to invest in from a timing perspective, right? Like I've been in cybersecurity for 24 years, but when you look at what's on the horizon, should I focus my training on zero trust? Should I focus my training on AI, machine learning? Should I focus my learning on other technologies that are coming out and so forth? So it just, you can hear these buzzwords, but at the same time, you're saying, how do I position myself for what's best? Like
Uh,
recently, I'm into incident response, right? I run incident
mhm.
response for a company now, and one of our biggest things is just locking down the environment, just configuration management.
Yeah,
It's great to have new systems and zero trust and DLPs and so forth. But what we're seeing is just the blocking and tackling. We still have domain admin guys checking their email and clicking on
mhm.
links. We still have the same admin password on all desktops with SMB allowed. So lateral movement for ransomware is
Yeah,
easy. It goes off like wildfire. And it's these blocking and tackling. PowerShell, for instance, being open and allowed on full
mhm.
language context, and attackers are building their own C2 network through
It's
PowerShell, through all their
exactly.
machines. And I keep stepping back and hearing, people talk about these great strategic plans they're going to put forward for the board, but they don't realize that you should have a huge blocking and tackling, just a remediation of old technology, and the hardening of it should be number one on all of it. Shouldn't be a new AI system, should not be new zero trust until you get the basics, and then you're able to build zero trust on top of that. If not, I get the feeling you're trying to zero trust something that you can't do because the technology wouldn't support it. Is that right?
Absolutely. Zero trust is a concept and a framework, as we said. So these pillars, so we talked about devices is one pillar. These devices not in the best practices way to be looking down, having management software that control the device and remove these built-in accounts and ensure that the device join the domain and has the right configuration locked down on it. Then I have a missing pillar. I cannot put the roof, which is zero trust, on the top. So this is looking at the pillar, fixing the pillar, at least have level one maturity across all identity, devices, application, data, and network. And then I can say, I'm going to start my zero trust journey from here. I already have the foundation right. And this is a journey because talking about AI, AI is just a tool. It's just an improvement. It's like IPv6 or 5G. It's just tool that makes my job easier because, as you know, remember when some solution were just dummy dumping ground for logs, and now you have automation, orchestration. These are just tools, but it's built on the top of the best practices. Central location to collect all the information, and then I have more tool. And when I say AI, yes, that's on top of the information that I'm collecting. But if I'm not collecting the information on day one, I don't have all the system integrated into that central data lake. Yeah, I cannot use AI because it has a lot of missing information.
We talked about zero trust, something we hear in the industry a lot. There's some people that are focused on it, some are not. And you brought up some key points here from an infrastructure perspective. There's a lot of that kind of standardization that you need to get into. So I would say if you're to see a zero trust implementation, there should be some roadmap that shows hardware migration or enhancement or getting rid of older systems that don't comply, as well as like rudimentary baseline zero trust aspects in order for you to reach the maturity of a true zero trust and start benefiting from that. Is that kind of your focus as well, you're thinking?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, gap analysis, define your short-term goals, stick to them, or understand that they're going to be a medium range and a long range goal. And even when you reach your long range goals, they're going to be improvement. As we said, new technologies will become more available that will allow you to add more control, to have more visibility, and to add more verification. And you're going to incorporate that. So the trust journey is going to be continual journey. Just you are improving and reaching a new level of maturity. Technologies doesn't change concepts. The concepts, if they are correct, tested, working, they're going to remain. But now I have just more tools in my disposal to enforce this concept further. I couldn't do 100% traffic inspection because of hardware limitation. Now we have cloud computing that can give me this scalability. Then I will utilize that and make it part of my zero trust implementation. Maybe in the future, there will be more new technologies. AI will be better at, inspecting every packet. Then I will utilize that. But when we reach there, If I don't have the foundation right, I will never reach there. It's going to be always, I invested a lot of money. I have not seen return on investment because the investment itself wasn't well planned.
No, yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I get a lot of people, at least in the US, I hear them say, I want to implement zero trust, as if that's just panacea. You just buy Zscaler or something like that, you throw it in there and
Exactly.
you're up and running. And I don't think they realize that this is an actual paradigm shift and that you need to move in technology and upgrades and all that come across. It's not just a new methodology, it's also new
Uh,
technology.
and even for existing technologies, many have great existing technology, but has not been utilized to its full potential to be part of a zero trust implementation. And that's where, the gap analysis comes and say, we have this great product that we have not implemented the right way for zero trust.
Yeah.
We can keep it and see how this integrate with the rest of the ecosystem that we are trying to build around zero trust.
Well, Kamel, that's all our time today. I really appreciate having you on the call. Any last words for cybersecurity people that are operating or have functions within the Middle East, or things about Zscaler that the rest of the audience?
Understand the concept. Whether you are a vendor or a customer, try to understand the concept. Understand how this concept can benefit in your situation, your customer or your environment, and build your own interpretation to maximize the ROI. This is the most important thing. Cybersecurity is considered a cost center, but it can be a profit center if you have a proper ROI with collaboration with business department. And that's the most important thing for the stakeholders and the board to look at and say, we have saved money actually by implementing these additional security measures, and not just spend money and nothing happened because that's our goal, nothing to happen. Everything is working fine. They have no disturbance. So that's the most important thing.
Good to know. Well, Kamel, it was great talking to you, man. And hopefully everybody will look you up on LinkedIn and follow you. And I just appreciate knowing you for the last 10 years, something like that. All your help when I was going through the Middle East and helping to get into different customer accounts and so forth. So appreciate your time. Thanks, Kamel.
Thank you
And we'll
for
be
having
talking to you
me.
soon.
I hope to see you soon in the Middle East. The cybersecurity and IT events are exploding in size.
Like Jai
And
sang.
hopefully, JISEC, JITEX, Black Hat in Saudi, these are become a large attraction. JITEX this year was the biggest ever. We had around 32 exhibitor hall in Dubai. Leap is going to be almost on the same in Saudi in a couple of months. So we're looking forward to welcome you. Take a look and see how this region is growing and booming for yourself.
That's awesome. Well, Kamel, you have a great day. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to share and like on this episode, and we'll catch y'all soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Cybersecurity America on the Voice America Business Channel. We hope you've learned some valuable information to help you be a better executive leader and navigate today's complex world of cybersecurity. Until next week, stay secure.